this rather snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Get It Right Texoma with the Tree. I'm Mike Hendren. This is Terry McAdams. That's Trey Sarala. We welcome you here each and every, well, actually, we try to do 3 of these a week, but each and every episode, thank you for being with us. Obviously, if you're watching, you're seeing us on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Be sure to check out our website, getitrighttexoma.com, and you can follow us on Facebook. We'd love to hear your comments, your complaints, your cheers, your jeers, whatever. We just want to hear from you. We're here to inform you and hopefully entertain you. We do cover a lot of local events and news and happenings, and also a lot of state, regional, national, international, and occasionally the intergalactic as well.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while. You know, little Martians land and whatever. But anyway.
Mike gets his marching orders. They plug him in, download him, and unplug him.
You remember My Favorite Martian?
Actually, I've seen that, yes.
You've seen it, okay.
I've seen reruns of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Terry, we weren't live when it was on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's on.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I don't know what year it was, but I think it was in rerun.
Oh, this program is being sponsored in part by Eddie Hills Fun Cycles at 401 North Scott in downtown Wichita Falls. EddieHillsFunCycles.com. MacTech Solutions at 4020 Ray Road, Suite 3B here in Wichita Falls. MacTech-Solutions.com. And also Lolly and Pop Sweet Shop online at lpsweet.com and on Facebook, Lolly and Pop Sweet Shop. Lollie is how you spell Lolly in that case on Facebook. We often have special guests with us, and today is no exception. We got a very special guest with us. Our representative here in Texas for our, what are we, District 69?
District 69.
69, James Frank is with us. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to be here.
Glad to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
It's been a day or two.
It's been a minute.
You were a frequent guest on the radio show when I was doing that.
Yep.
And
actually been a calling guest to this podcast once.
What?
We did a phone. You did a call in.
That's
one time,
right. That's
early on in the podcast.
Yeah. Was that when it was just you and me doing it?
No, it was in the studio. It was in here, I believe.
Was it?
We were, yeah. We
It was
had done
very early on.
I remember.
It was like episode 2, 3, something like that.
Yeah.
Whenever you call, I'll be here.
Yeah.
Must have followed us out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sound like a song.
It's a pleasure to have you. We certainly have lots to talk about, and I don't know if there's anything special you want to open with, but one thing I would like to open with here that has been.
Don't you love it? I don't know if you want to open with something special, but it doesn't matter. I want to go.
I knew my staff said, "Hey, what do you need to prepare for that?" I said, "There's no preparing for Trey and for Mike.
You just show up
and whatever is asked is asked.
Yeah. Roll the dice, baby."
That's right.
The border has been the issue, I think, probably among everything of all the things that you are having to deal with legislatively that you shouldn't be having to deal with.
Right. Yeah. It's clearly a responsibility of the federal government,
which they have totally let you down on.
Which they have abdicated, and it really is fascinating when you look at, the conservative or the Republican position has been clear from the start to we want immigrants, but we want them legally.
Right.
That has been clear. The Democrat position really confuses me on this, because literally they have open border, and then yet when you look at now Kamala Harris's or Vice President's ads, literally she has ads saying she's tougher on the border than Trump, and I'm like, if you know that's what people want, why for 4 years have you completely abdicated it? It's like they can't help themselves, and I think. They clearly see that this is a huge issue for everybody, including Democrats. Honestly,
Absolutely.
Democrats want reasonable borders.
This is an all-American issue. If you're an American, this is an issue.
Well, there was a time when the border issue affected border states. Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California were the ones immediately impacted. Now it's become a national problem.
Well, really, give Governor Abbott credit. I think one of the best political moves that I have ever seen. And honestly, I thought it maybe wasn't a great idea when it started, was the busing of immigrants, because it just didn't feel right. But it made it an issue for everyone.
Yes.
And when you have New York City complaining about 10,000 people coming in a town or in a city of 10 million, it just...
It's one thing to look at pictures and postcards and videos, and a whole nother thing to live it.
Yeah, when it's somebody else's problem. And honestly, often we are not helping the very people that, Democrats think they're trying to help. They're creating havoc at the border. They're creating more drug traffic. They're creating other things that are not helping people.
Oh, the human trafficking to me is the worst part of it.
Absolutely.
I hate the drugs and all that. But when you're talking about people trafficking in human beings, especially children preying on children, that's the stuff that just turns my stomach and it just makes me ill.
And then we got people. I just read an article the other day about Chinese coming through some elaborate path to go through Tijuana.
Yeah.
And it's like, how?
So it's the state has spent a lot of money, and we're spending a couple of $1 billion a year trying to manage the border of state funds. And I say state funds are all taxpayer funds, but through state collections that we shouldn't have to be.
The federal government should
absolutely should be spending on anything else or giving back to people through property tax relief. But I hopefully, if we have the Trump administration back in, then that will be something they will take responsibility for, and we can let them do their job.
Yeah.
Because we got plenty of other things that we ought to be focused on at the state level.
Oh, absolutely. And this issue with the border, just yesterday I heard some more news about something to do with the physical barrier that we've put in the river to try to stop people from getting across.
Yeah, I think the courts ruled that we were able to continue doing that.
Yeah. And so, we're at a point now where we have spent multiple billions of dollars to try to secure our portion of that border as much as we can. At some point, do you really think the federal government will ever reimburse Texas for any of that? Or no,
I think our best hope is that they actually start doing it, and then we can pull back on the money that we're spending. I mean, it would be nice to think they would, but and honestly, they don't have any money anyway. All they would do is just increase the debt that your grandchildren owe in order to reimburse us today at some point, which is a whole nother thing.
Oh yeah, well one of the greatest videos out there. It's Alan Greenspan. So this is several years old, obviously. He's on one of the Sunday magazine shows, and he's asked about the debt, and there was a chance we were going to default, or our credit rating had gotten cut. Our credit rating had gotten cut from like AAA to AA or something, and he made the remark that there's no worry, we're never going to default. We'll just print more money.
Right.
He said it. He just said it.
Said it into a microphone.
We'll just print more money. And the guest that's with him, I think it was a congressman. He's looking at him like, "What the hell did you just say?
Yeah, why did you just say that out loud?"
Well, it's always been the case when you create your own money and you can borrow. That's always been the case, and the risk has always been not default. The risk has always been inflation. Mm-hmm. And everybody
when does
sees
that ever happen? Huh?
That's right. When does that ever happen? And it's kind of amazing to me that we haven't had more inflation with the amount of money that has been put into the system. And when you saw it during COVID, double up on the amount of money just thrown all over the place. Supply and demand. Yeah. You have inflation.
The reason we had the inflation that we've had in the last 4 years is because of all the mailbox money that got sent out. Yep. We printed up trillions of dollars and just, hey, here's some free money.
But inflation really is an additional tax on people. It is not looked at like a tax.
And it usually
but it is. It
disproportionately affects people who are poor. Obviously,
absolutely.
If you make a decent living, if you're middle class and especially upper middle class, you don't really care that eggs went up $1 for a carton of eggs. If you want a carton of eggs, you're going to get a carton of eggs because the dollar doesn't mean much. Right. But if you are poor and especially working poor, and not somebody who's on government benefits, and you're actually working, but you're on, and like I said, you're a working poor person, that extra dollar plus the dollar on the bread, plus the dollar on this, plus the dollar on this, all of a sudden that adds up in a hurry. Yep. You have to start making choices.
Well, you mentioned the debt. The national debt, we crossed the 35 trillion mark just the other day.
We're number one.
This impacts all of us. Texas, every state in the union, every person in the country is impacted by it. Does this ever come up in the state legislature, how the national debt is impacting what we're able to do as a state for ourselves? Does that ever come up?
It does, but honestly, you don't feel like you can do much about it. We can call for a convention of the states. We can call for, and we have, and we need to do that again. Because really, there needs to be a balanced budget at the federal level. I say all the time, the state balances its budget every year, and virtually every state does. I think 49 have a balanced budget amendment, and And although we can't borrow money either
Right.
without getting approval of voters, which is awesome. And therefore, we spend within our means, not because we want to, but because we have to.
Right.
The only way to ever get the federal government to do that is to have a balanced budget amendment. And obviously, it would have to stagger in to make it work now. You'd have to have some exceptions in the event of war to be able to. But that's the only way it's ever going to happen, because people will not vote for it. Because at the end of the day, if those congressmen say, hey, I can give you this benefit and I won't raise your taxes, you're always going to get more than 50% vote. It's just human nature. Like, if I can give you something for free, people will vote for it even if their grandkids are paying for it, which is really what we're doing. We're living today as a society. We're living today off the backs of our kids and grandkids, which is the ultimate, actually, taxation without representation.
Oh,
Well, they're not even born.
They're not even born, and they are getting taxed today, and we are enjoying the fruit. We as a society are living larger than we should, based on the backs of
I'll tell you something.
generations. It should be illegal.
The founders of this country would already be stacking bodies like cordwood.
Yeah,
They would not have put up with what's going on today. It's crazy that we sit back.
But we do need to be careful with those types of phraseologies.
Well, but I'm just
at this
saying.
point.
I'm just saying.
No, I know.
They would have already said, "Oh, hell no,
Yeah.
no, we're not
No,
putting up with this." There's no way that they would have tolerated it. But yet we sit back and we're perfectly. We see. You mentioned, if they say they can give you something for free. What people don't realize is there is no such thing as free.
Nothing free.
Your
Nothing is free.
grandkids, as you said, they're going to pay for the.
There's no such thing as free, but there is such thing as me getting something that you pay for.
Exactly.
That there's a lot.
Well, that's the
And really,
ultimate.
that is society. We have to change that.
Well, it's just like with
mindset and
Social Security. The money we're paying in today in Social Security, every one of us, that's not going into some lockbox for us to collect on in a few years. That's paying for benefits that are being handed out today, right now. We are financing today's
But that's
benefits.
only because it was done poorly at the U.S. Congress. You put
Yes.
you put that up against how we do the employee retirement account or the teacher's retirement account in Texas.
Yes.
Again, not because
Yes.
we're smart, but because we have to, and the way it's. I guess our founders were smart enough to force us to do it. Yeah. Literally, the teacher's retirement money goes in as soon as that check is cut to the teacher. It goes in. It does go into a lockbox, not governed by us, but governed by a separate group that have teacher representatives and that kind of thing. So it does come down to the financial discipline, and there really just is zero financial discipline at the federal government.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to state,
Yeah,
because we can't
absolutely.
do anything. We can't do anything.
That's right.
about
That's
this.
right. We will.
So
Yeah.
leading up, of course, next early in January, we'll start a new session.
Yes, we will.
Right.
January 14th. Not that I'm counting.
So what are you working on? You and your staff working on leading up to the session?
Well, I probably spend half my time on healthcare. In this country, we pay twice as much for healthcare as it should cost for about the same results as the rest of the first world. And most of the reason is because government. It is things that we can change. Most of it is, a lot of it's done at the federal level, but there are things we can do at the state level. For instance, you pay a lot more for your medicines than you should. And you do because there's no competition domestically. Literally, the FDA doesn't allow importation of drugs from Canada, from Europe, from Japan, all these places that have very safe drug protocols. Maybe they didn't 50 years ago when the rules were made, but they do now. Yeah. So you have drugs made in this country that are sold for a quarter, half overseas where they have competition that aren't here. So last year we did a bill that basically said the state is going to allow importation of drugs from Canada. And really what we did is to set it up where we could challenge the federal government. And then the Biden administration has since said, okay, on a limited basis, we're going to allow importation of drugs from Canada. And it was not just us. Actually, Florida did it as well, some others. There's some things we can do to create competition. But when you look at what you spend on health care, the average family spends $20,000 to $22,000 between themselves and their employer. And that should be $11,000 to $10,000. What would the average citizen do in this country if their family had an extra $10,000 to $11,000 to spend? Because that's what they should have.
What they would do it for our economy. Just think what it would like fire to our economy.
Yeah, and the problem is you have big entities making inordinate amount of money. You have a lack of competition in so many places. You have, we have many hospital monopolies that have no checks and balances on how much they charge because they're the only game in town. For instance, you have insurance companies that have bought up PBMs. Anyway, so I could geek out on that a lot, but that's where I will probably spend half my time because as chairman of the Human Services, I'm over the state Medicaid system, and that's a lot of about 5 million people and a whole lot of money, 40 something billion dollars a year.
Oh, yeah.
So I spend a lot of time on the healthcare stuff. I can go on and on about the different things that we're working on. If you want, we're working on some of the public ed stuff.
Quickly, how would that be implemented? I mean, how could it be so you could make it to where Texans could buy prescription medicine out other places, but like somebody in Oklahoma could not?
Well, really what we're trying to do and what already has happened is force the federal government to unwind some of their stupid. You give us standing to sue the federal government to say you're not allowing our citizens to import drugs and there is no safety risk. The only safety risk is to the profits of some of these big companies.
Right.
And it's funny. I feel like I'm like on the other side of the spectrum. I think Republicans or conservatives need to remember we are not supposed to be pro-business. We are pro-free enterprise. Yeah. And so many of these businesses have become monopolies or near monopolies that have nothing to do with providing great service. They are only about capturing not value. Because when a business innovates and creates value for somebody and competes for business, everybody wins. The business can make money, people are better off. When you allow, and the federal government certainly does, allow these businesses to consolidate and consolidate and consolidate, it doesn't make things better. It makes things worse. Right. And you can see it. And really, so one of the other ways we're working on is to figure out at the state level, particularly in healthcare, when you have monopolies, who's governing them? A local, if you have a monopoly in a certain area, who governs that? Mm-hmm. Is there any limit to what you can charge?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right? That's a pretty, I mean, who governs that? Well, to me, the federal government does, but the federal government is set up to govern razor blades or car manufacturers or steel business or that kind of stuff. They're not set up to handle some of the medical monopolies that exist and drive prices up.
Perhaps an irony in all of this with the drugs and the importation. And this sort of came to light during the pandemic when it was impossible to import certain things from China, and we're finding out that there are certain components of certain drugs that we were importing or drug manufacturers were getting from China that they couldn't get.
Right.
And so it created shortages of certain medications. There were blood pressure medications. There were cancer drugs that you couldn't get in 2020 and 2021 because the components of the drugs were not available. Yep. The manufacturer couldn't create them, and everybody's sucking everything off the shelf that's stocked up. Yep. And all of a sudden, the drugs aren't there anymore, and we start to find out, well, part of the reason is we have to import A, B, and C from China, and we can't get that right now. Yep. And so that brought to light a lot of problematic issues within the drug manufacturing sector itself.
Absolutely.
And how much stuff we are not able to make domestically.
Right.
Matter of fact, I had a pharmacist tell me, he said, Mike, I'm going to tell you something. There are certain drugs in this country, he said, particularly cancer drugs. You go to any given pharmacy in the country, you got about a 3-day supply on the shelf. That's it. That's all you got. That's all you can stockpile. You got about a 3-day supply. Beyond that, you're relying on a manufacturer and an intermediary to ship you the drugs when you need them, or when a doctor orders them, or when a hospital orders them, or whatever. Beyond that, you don't have them. He said, we don't have months and months and months worth of some of these drugs sitting around. We can't. They don't have, number one, they don't have a shelf life like that. And number two, you can't afford to keep them around. They're very expensive, very costly. And that goes back to the cost factor. Yeah. So, there's a lot of problems there that need to be addressed, and maybe by Texas doing what it's doing, maybe we force the feds
I think that's the hope, because the problem with the FDA and the FTC, many of those people in those bureaucracies, their big payoff is when they finally get the job at Merck or Pfizer or whatever. Yeah. And so sometimes it feels like the fox guarding the hen house.
Yep. Yeah.
Because
there needs to be some major reform at that too.
Yeah. And so I think there are some things that we can do at the state level, where actually there's some things that we've done with the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers have established a state clearinghouse, if you will, to try to. There's a lot of money being taken advantage of in the PBM world. Yeah. It gets pretty complicated, but basically the pharmacy benefit managers are the ones that consolidate the drug purchases. And they are now owned by, ever since the federal government has a antitrust to try to keep this stuff from happening, they put the PBMs in a safe harbor provision, allowing them to do kickbacks. Well, since that happened, the insurance companies have bought, now they're all inter-owned. The 5 big insurance companies inter-own all the 3 big PBMs, 85% of the market. And so now there's these huge markups that you don't see unless you are really smart or a really big provider. If not, if you're the small guy, you basically just pay it and you don't even know you're paying a kickback.
You're in a manufacturing industry yourself.
Yep.
If you tried to do some of the things in your business that some of the others do, you'd have someone coming down on you hard.
Literally, the practice that the PBMs are doing would put you in jail if you were a doctor, if you were in manufacturing. But they have a safe harbor provision written by Congress,
right.
So they put it in their footnotes to their financial statement, bragging on how they are able to increase profit.
If you guys did
because
that,
of this,
Teddy Roosevelt will come out of his grave and come and shut you down. He'd bust that trust up.
And that's where sometimes I do think, you know, and look, there's a lot of issues. I think this one only can be attacked really bipartisan. It's funny. I've read, embarrassing to say, a book by Amy Klobuchar. I mean, I don't agree with her on 95 things out of 100 I would disagree on, but she wrote a book about antitrust, and it is so true. Like, again, this is where I think conservatives need to remember it is not our job to back businesses no matter what they do. Free enterprise is the conservative belief, and that includes holding those businesses. That doesn't make them bad people. It just means they need to have a really clear set of rules, and whether we like it or not, the government is the only one that can put those in place.
Let's talk about property tax.
So, okay.
Let's talk about property tax for a moment here. So we've raised the homestead exemption to $100,000, right?
Right.
That has been implemented now.
Right.
But still, one of the big
just on the M&O portion of the school tax.
Right.
Just on one portion, big portion, but
right. But your school taxes, that makes up the biggest part.
But it's not
even all the school taxes.
It's not on the bond side.
It's not on all parts of your property tax, but it is on a big part.
Right, and I mean, most people don't even understand how that maintenance and operations breakout works. You know, they don't understand how that is budgeted out, and legally it has to be that way.
I can do a show on that.
I know you could.
That'll get 3 people.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's pretty boring. Pretty boring.
One of the big concerns remains how the appraisal districts are valuing property. You're seeing property values. You know, if the tax rate can stay here, but if the appraised value, the taxable value, just keeps creeping up, your tax obligation keeps going up.
Well, remember, 4 years ago or 2 sessions ago, we had a bill that limited the increase. So if everybody's property, and it ended up being very fortunate because a lot of us in the areas that weren't growing a lot were like, well, this isn't really ever going to help us. And then we had COVID and the 25% total increase. But if you remember, when we had the 25% total value increase around the county, you know, in property value, there was a requirement that the rates go down so that there was only a 3.5% increase. Okay. And that was forced because what had happened before is there were these big increases and the folks would just say, hey, we didn't increase our rate. Well, yeah, but your values went up 25%. Well, we passed that really, as it turned out, just in time. And we didn't know that, but that it helped this market. So you don't have those, if the total values go up, you don't have those huge increases like you used to unless you vote for it. You know, so like we did the school bond, or at least here in Wichita, did the school bond. So you had a tax increase for that, but that was voted on. So you had an increase, but your normal rate doesn't increase more than your taxable value shouldn't increase. I'm sorry, what you pay in taxes shouldn't increase by more than 3.5%, unless your property is really increasing faster than everyone else's.
Yeah.
Because sorry, I know that gets complicated. The 3.5% is for all properties. So if your property is actually increasing faster than others, your taxes can go up more.
Well, I know what the county says my house is worth.
Right.
And I also know for a fact that I probably could sell it for about $25,000 less than what they say it's worth.
Yeah.
Realistically, given the market conditions, I know that's what I could do.
Right.
Well, you have that's why you have that protest.
And you have a protest. But I will tell you, most people that I talk to when they talk about their property value and they say it's too high, I say, would you sell it for that? Most people say, oh no, I wouldn't sell it for that. Well then. It's not. You may be in a different situation. Everybody is in a.
Well, but what's interesting
I wouldn't sell my house for what mine's valued.
Right. Most people wouldn't.
But on that though, if if most properties are going up anyway, some of that just balances out because right? Because we've talked about that on the radio before, where the process by which taxing authorities assess the taxes, right? You look at a budget. You need X number of dollars to do your budget, and y'all figure out what current rates and everything, and within the law, you apply those things, and then see if that's even going to be. And you voted on it, and sometimes you can't do it, and you have to back off that budget or whatever, right? I mean that's just kind of whatever the political will. But basically what I'm saying is that if everything goes up, then the percentage across the board, at least for a period of time, will balance out, right? So if
everybody's goes up, if everybody's property in town goes up 10%,
right,
then the
rate,
the taxing entities have to drop the rates by 6.5%. It's actually not the way the math works, but such that there's only a 3.5% increase in total.
Right.
It's called the no new revenue rate, but that's what they have to do, or they have to go to voters.
Right.
They don't have to go that high,
right, but
they can't go any more than that, and so. That was really to protect against people just getting taxed out of their house without getting to vote on it.
Right. Well, but on that, with the math though, and everything, the way that works is that you end up just working it where it makes it fair inherently, and the law says you got to reduce the rate. So, but a politician can run and say, "Oh I reduced the tax rate,"
right?
But really, it didn't, and the taxes went up.
I know
you got to watch out for what politicians say anyway. You can't trust them.
They'll tell you anything.
They'll tell you anything.
But I know there's been a big push for years about eliminating property taxes. Governor Abbott's talked about getting rid of property taxes. Do you ever see a feasible, realistic way to do that? What would you replace it with?
Well, and that's the issue. And trust me, I've got folks that talk to me a lot about that. Wow. And the issue, the only one that seems reasonable is to do the sales tax. But then sales tax, if our sales tax becomes 10% higher than, and particularly honestly for cities like Wichita Falls that are close to the border, who's going to shop here if your sales tax rate is 10% higher than Oklahoma?
I would move Eddie Hill's Fun Cycles to Randlett, Oklahoma. Seriously, I would.
You'd have to.
You'd almost have to.
And so most of them aren't.
Solutions we could go
I'll just say what currently is happening. We have made two pretty significant cuts in the M&O taxes over the last couple of years. Over the last 6 years, we have used sales tax. The state collects the sales tax. We have had more sales tax increase than we have spent, and so we have taken, I guess, a few years ago or 4 years ago, I think we spent $5 billion of the money. This time we spent $12 billion. So but the growth of the 5 is actually 6. So now $18 billion we are spending of sales tax revenue to buy down your M&O taxes. If we keep doing that, it would take 50 to 60 years at the rate we're doing. But if we continue to use sales tax to buy down property tax, that is a way to do it. Is it a great, I know 50 or 60 years sounds like a lot of time, but it's the right. I told somebody, they were fussing at me. I said, look, name another level of government that's cutting your taxes. I mean, we may be bad, but we're the smartest staff student. We're I know we're not doing as well as we should, but there are also competing interests. We're having to fund Medicaid, and we don't have control of that because the federal government has a lot of control of that. We're making, trying to fund schools, trying to fund, and we're doing it on a balanced budget. And I'm not complaining. I'm just saying there's a lot of competing interests when you start talking about where to use the state revenue. People want universities, people want roads, people sometimes want water. There's
shocking.
Shocking.
Since you've been in office for a few years, right? How many years have you been?
12 years.
12 years. Okay. So through that time, you've seen that especially with COVID and the technology and everything. Talk about colleges. People want colleges. Well, what has happened that you've seen as far as the trend of college really not even being required hardly anymore, because there's so many other options? And are we competing? I think this universities have priced themselves out. Even in Texas.
Yes, you're right. Well, the information is so quick and easy to get now. I mean, if you really want to learn, you have access to almost anything online. The smartest people, professors, books, you can learn. There are some things that I think will always require universities, but there's also some things that honestly people go to university for that, like, you spent 4 years doing that and pay, you got $150,000 debt.
And sociology.
I will not mention any degrees because look, there is benefit of learning how to think.
Right. Yeah.
We ought to be doing that as much as possible, as early as possible. We shouldn't be waiting for college to teach people to think critically either.
Right.
Yeah.
There should be, we should try to be pushing that back and getting that done as quickly as we can.
Well, we talked the other day here. We had Donnie Lee, the superintendent, with us as a guest. We were talking about the new schools, and we were talking about curriculum. For myself, I think, and Trey brought this up too, we need to be teaching these kids some life skills in the public school system. They need to come out of high school knowing how to fill out a job application, knowing how to build a resume, knowing how to balance their bank account, knowing how to manage money,
knowing how to look at an estimate from a mechanic.
Yeah.
Honestly, knowing how to change your own tire, how to change your own oil, how to, there's a lot of things that are life skills.
Understanding what that finance document means on a car.
Exactly.
How much interest you're going to pay.
Exactly. They come out of high school not knowing any of these things, not having any of these skill sets at all. We just don't make that a priority.
Well,
how can we make that a priority?
Some do, some don't. I mean, it sounds bad. To me, it's a whole culture shift.
Oh, sure.
But it starts with the little things. I think, like in public schools, I think we need to engage parents more. It is very difficult, and I've had this conversation with a number of the schools. How do you move a kid significantly past the expectations of their parents?
Yeah.
Well, you really don't very often. You might. I mean, everybody can point to 1 or 2 or 5 kids, and those are important and awesome. But we need to engage the parents in this process as well, in the education process, and not push them out. And now, honestly, I think parents have pretty well been pushed out, not for any one person's fault, but the system that has been created. And I think the more things that we can do to do that, the better. I think the more teachers can make true application instead of, I don't know why math should be taught using that estimate.
Yeah,
where it actually matters. I talked to Aaron Alejandro, the FAA.
FFA.
Sorry, I always get that in my manufacturing. I deal with the FAA. But sorry, FFA. But in talk about ag, we call it ag, and it's really applied science. It's like real things. Like you got to eat. So if you told a kid you got to eat, I bet you could do the math to make sure that you get enough water on. Whatever, you know what I mean? Like
whatever crop it is.
Yeah, whatever crop it is. That we can make things meaningful to where kids can learn. And I think the other thing to remember, though, is sometimes we go, none of these kids, I've met some incredible kids. There's some incredible young people out there. Sometimes we kind of writing off everybody because somebody's, you watched a video that showed that a kid can't, name where.
Or count change.
Yeah, count change or whatever. But there's a lot of incredible kids. We just need to lift those people up more.
Well, you mentioned engaging the parents. I'll tell you, in my observation, and I think you start to see this at the elementary school level. Far too many parents just treat the public school as nothing more than a glorified babysitter.
It's a dual problem.
They dump the kid. It's a place to go dump the kid off for 8 hours a day, so they don't have to mess with it.
The school has created a system. The school is part of
the school and legislators.
And
have
partially
created the problem.
And parents are partially blamed because they're willing to accept it.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, and I would say. And I think you said it perfectly. It is a dual issue. Mm-hmm. The schools need to look for ways to engage the parent because you've got to at some point admit, and every school person I will talk to admit this, we really can't move the kids much past the parent.
Nope.
Well, what are you doing to engage the parent? Well, we don't have any money to engage the parent, or we don't have a program to engage the parent. Okay, well, what should it be? Because when you can engage the parent, you teach a parent to read to a kid, all of a sudden you don't have kids showing up not knowing what letters are. You have to do that. Now, the parents need to engage.
That's the other side.
There is the other side. But we have set up a system where literally we don't even want you to feed the kid before they come because 5 or 10% of the kids were coming to school hungry, and we need to take care of those kids. But we need to go address it. Now we have 100% of kids being fed. We're sending food home on weekends. And I'm not against that stuff. But I am saying if you don't engage the parent, it is a fool's game. You are never going to be able to raise a child in a school without engaging
when they grow
the
up to be parents, they're going to expect that.
Right.
And
They already do. And so we have to start. And that's one of the things that I've gotten fussed out a lot about this on the school choice issue, or I call it the parental choice issue, because you're trying to give parents a choice of what to do. Sure. If you're a poor parent and you don't have the ability to even choose where you go, I'll say it. I was getting my hair cut, and I had no, you know what? I'm not going to share it. May have to cut that.
Okay.
Because it would say who it is. I'd be telling her story.
Well,
we'll cut that.
I will tell you.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
It's a great story. I just don't know.
No, that's fine.
I just don't. She's in town.
We're good. So.
Sorry.
I will say this: part of this issue comes down to communication.
Absolutely.
You talk about needing to engage the parents better. We need to empower teachers and administrators, equip them better to communicate.
Yep.
We don't, and I think that goes back to some degree to their education they get at the collegiate level when they're getting that teaching degree or that administrative, whatever master's program they go through to be an administrator or whatever. We need to start teaching people better communication skills. Part of the problem is people today, especially, it seems to be most especially the under 45 crowd, have such a hard time starting a conversation with anybody, having a conversation with anybody. And that's where the rubber meets the road. You want to engage those parents. First and foremost, you've got to be able to communicate with them. You can't make them communicate with you, but you've got to be able to reach out to them and talk to them intelligently and figure out what the conversation starters need to be to get that engagement rolling.
And I agree. I totally agree with every bit of that. But the other side of that story is too, there are all parents have to take the responsibility as well.
Of course.
To include themselves in that school. Because if you show up at that school and say, "Hey, I'm going to volunteer," you make yourself you put yourself in that position. And
I'm going to tell a story I was going to, but I was talking to a person that I came in contact with, and they literally said, and it was just a passing conversation, said, husband and I just moved into this house. It was the only one that we could afford. And she said, but the problem is I've got a 5-year-old, and it scares me that they're going to have to go to this school.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the legislature was working on a deal where you could and she said, we can't afford it, but we've tried to figure out, can we get a scholarship to a private school? She mentioned one of the ones in town. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, the legislature was working on a way where you would have that choice. And she was so excited about the possibility that she could have a choice where she educated her child other than where she gets assigned. I tell people, imagine if when you went to college, okay, you're about to go to college, because honestly, whether we like it or not, most decisions are made by the college educated, and then they want to pretend they know what's best for everybody else. Imagine when you were going to college, if somebody said, okay, good for you, congratulations, you're going to college, only you're going to the nearest college.
Right.
Whatever the nearest college is, that's the one you go to. Well, I want a choice.
Yeah.
Well, no, you're going to the nearest one.
No, you can't go to A&M Kingsville. You got to go to Midwestern State University.
Right.
That's it. That's your only option.
That's your only option. And, bully on you if you happen to be a good one, or if you happen to have a perfect one, or whatever. But it is when the first thing you get told is you have no choice even where to go.
Yeah.
It's hard to say I engage my, and you look at the way the schools are, and I know we have to do safety, and I'm not saying I have an answer for this, but we have it where literally most parents will never be able to darken the door of a school. Okay? And so, and we have set up the system to do that. And we have set up,
but that's when parents need to get engaged and push back.
Absolutely.
Because all you got to do to overcome that is you go, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to stand for this. Who's my school board member? Who's my administrator? And you can make changes, but you have to push.
Yeah, I agree. But Trey, to ask people to say, you need to go change your school board member if you have a problem in the school. The easiest way to do it is to say, Trey, if you don't like your school, you can go somewhere else.
No,
that's how you vote.
I didn't say it's I didn't say it's not capable. I'm just simply saying, but you also can make a difference in the other direction. I'm not
absolutely.
Saying, I understand you have a point. I'm not.
And by the way, we have there's at least 2 of the 3 school board seats do not have somebody that is going to run, from my understanding, for November. So if anybody's out here and wants to get involved in it, we need quality school board members.
Yeah.
Not saying we don't have quality school board members in Wichita. I'm
and
saying I think there's a couple that are going to be completely open, and we need people that want to improve the situation.
For the right reason.
It's one of the most difficult. I think
on time.
Trey, I think,
to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
sorry.
I think Trey will agree with me. It's one of the most difficult elected offices to recruit for. He ran for what 12? You served for 12 years.
Yeah.
Never had an opponent.
Never
had to buy a campaign sign. Never had to spend $1 on an ad. You know, it's hard to find people that are willing to step into it.
It is on one side, but by the same token, because have you been opposed yet?
Well, I've got a Democrat opponent in the fall.
Okay, but you haven't.
I have not had a Republican primary.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of those. Yes, it is a better life, but by the same token, you kind of go, yeah, but why aren't 10 people trying to line up to do this?
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because it's not like you're paid a fabulous salary to show up every other year down
That's
there
fair.
to do that job.
That
you know,
is fair. Yeah.
I mean, it is. You know, it's with a school board. It's basically you're volunteering your time.
It costs you money to do it,
and it costs you money to do it. You know,
okay.
and there's a time commitment to it also. But
it's important.
Well, you mentioned. I think you alluded to this. I know of 2 elementary schools for sure right now that you pull up to the school, they come out, they meet your kid on the sidewalk, and they walk them in. You're not allowed to walk your kid into the school.
And by the way, I'm not blaming them because they are under a lot of pressure on other sides. I'm just saying collectively, and I think, Trey, I'm going to steal that from you. Would you say it's 2? It's both.
Yeah,
it's both sides. Yeah.
We have to. Parents have to stop. Parents have to understand that they are responsible for their kid.
Yeah,
and so the idea that my kid's failing school, what did you do wrong, should never come out of a parent's mouth. Right. The school is there to help you, and that's another thing I like about choice. Like, look, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. But it's your kid, so if they're failing, it's on you, not on the school, right?
Yeah.
The flip side is the school needs to find ways to say, hey, I'm going to have trouble helping this kid unless I can somehow engage the parent. The easiest way to do it is to somehow engage the parent. The parent's not the enemy. Yes, there's a lot of bad parents out there, or more than there should be, but there's also a lot of parents working their butts off trying to figure it out. So I think we just need to somehow, both sides need to kind of realize that they need each other.
I can promise you
it could be a collaborative effort, and that's what it used to be.
Must be
that's what it was for so many years.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's turned away from that.
I can promise you there's a lot of parents that would deeply appreciate it if the schools would reach out to them, if there was that engagement, and they don't get that.
And I guarantee you there's plenty of teachers that would
teachers would love
if the parent would reach out to them as well.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm saying. It works
I'm going to steal that because really it is so true.
Doesn't he come down there and talk to Congress?
Yeah, you do.
If you stole it from him, you stole it twice anyway.
We're running real short here. We really did real long. But real quickly, we do have, and I don't asking for any predictions, but just how big how many people do you think are going to compete for the Speaker of the House? Because
I always say 150.
Okay,
there's 150 members. I think everybody is. Yeah, I think
it looks like it's going to be more wide open than it was at one time.
I think that is fair.
Okay.
I think there will be a.
Wasn't asked for predictions. That's all I was asking was.
You can ask for anything.
It looks like I understand.
But,
I think competition's a healthy thing.
But it looks like it's gonna be more wide open than it has been in a couple of years past.
Yeah, I think it's pretty wide open. Yeah.
All right. Well,
anything you want to announce or talk about real quick before we get off?
No.
Now we got a big. What's our big thing with the state hospital?
The state hospital is going to have their groundbreaking. Sorry, you got me on the other issue. You were working that one. We got the groundbreaking for the new state hospital coming up.
Peyton, you owe me for that one.
Yeah.
and this is huge for this area. This is a huge project.
It certainly puts a stake in the ground that the hospital will be here for a long time. It's going to be a brand new hospital. State of the art.
They've done a lot of work out there over the last few years. I've seen fencing and that sort of thing come up.
Yep. So it's been on the drawing board for 6 years, and we finally gotten in our slot.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, James Frank, District 69 representative.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for being with us.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank y'all.
Appreciate it very much. Yeah. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way to reach out to you?
Easiest to probably pull the website. You can send an email there. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter. Those are the two. I'm more on Twitter
responds.
now.
On
I'm on.
Facebook.
Yeah. I've taken a little bit hiatus on Facebook, but I definitely will respond on either of those as much as I can. I've been on Twitter a little more lately. But those are the two. I need to get on some of the Instagram or that kind of stuff, but I'm too old. I think. X. I'm sorry, X. You're right.
Although they're
formerly
considering,
known as.
they're considering going back to Twitter.
I will say X is a lot harder to respond on because you're responding to everybody. I much prefer the Facebook where you're only responding to that person. It's much easier.
Individual.
It's much more. Yeah, it's much more natural. You know, I have people ask me thoughts on Twitter. I'm like, you can't. And it's 280 characters. I can't be right.
When people do that, they'll just do a multiples, and then it's like a rant at that point.
Yeah, that's right. So,
but it
Who's got time to sit around and
it
read
is
all this
very short-lived, and that's the thing about Twitter. It's just X, is it just goes by real fast.
Yeah. So I'm also in. I'm in town, and really when we're not in session, which will be in January, I'm in town. So if you want to set up an appointment, just. Give us a call.
All right. Very good. James Frank, thanks again for being with us.
Sure.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Get It Right Texoma. Again, be sure to visit our website, getitrighttexoma.com, and follow us on Facebook and share this on all your social media platforms as well. Let everybody know where you found it, please. Until next time, guys, take care. We'll see you down the road.